Morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Happy Father's Day. Now, in the lesson that I'm going to be bringing to you today, I want to encourage you that if you're on Facebook at all, and you're on the Leonard Church of Christ page, if you go to the Mother's Day lesson that I had, it kind of connects with that. So just so you're aware. Because for Mother's Day, we looked at, well, basically I wanted to do a lesson that didn't just pertain to the mothers of the audience. I don't think that's too fair. I think the message I want to bring you should apply to everybody, whether you're a mother, father, or neither of those. I think, I always like to present a lesson that all of us can share with or share from. And so, as we talk about Father's Day, I want to talk about another characteristic or another trait that I believe that we as Christians should really build our strength up on. And that is the attribute of integrity. Integrity. That's a big word. What does integrity mean? For the longest time, I didn't know what integrity meant. I thought it was just a weird word, to be honest. In the summer of 1805, there was, of course, this is after the Revolutionary War, and basically now they were Americans, but before they were colonists, they were really trying to promote Christianity to the Native Americans that were living in the area. And so in 1805, they get this council together in Buffalo Creek, New York. And at this council, you have a number of Indian chiefs and warriors who would meet there. And they were all there to listen to a sermon that was delivered by Mr. Cram of the Boston Missionary Society. And he gives this full length of a sermon. And after his sermon is over, one of the chiefs got up to speak for a while. Now, if you want to read his entire transcript, you can. It's out there. You can read it. But basically, this chief had a really hard time accepting what was being preached about, because in his mind, he felt that the people around him weren't practicing what was being preached to them. In other words, he didn't see the benefit of the preaching. His English name, by the way, was Chief Red Jacket. And the reason they called him Chief Red Jacket is because he sided with the British during the Revolutionary War. And fun fact about Mr. Chief Red Jacket, he actually would start to side with the colonists and aid them when he realized that the British were going to lose the war. So that's an interesting fact there. But in his speech, he gives a lot of different points, and a lot of his points were pretty good. One of them, for example, was about, he calls it the white man's drink. He's talking about liquor, hard liquor, which we brought from Europe. And so that was one of the things that he touched base on in that speech kind of towards the end. And actually, he would end up losing his chief position because of drinking. He was towards the end of that of his status as chief. He would get real drunk or dissipated, and they eventually had to remove him from that rank of authority. But he was a chief of the Seneca Nation, which was part of the Iroquois tribe, which was common in that northeastern part where New York is located today. And after the sermon, he said I want to bring up these two little paragraphs that he said. He said, "Brother, you say there's only one way to worship the Great Spirit. And if there is but one religion, why do white people differ so much from it? Why not all agree as you can read the same book?" The next transcript that he said was, "Brother, we're told that you've been preaching to the white people in this place. And these people are our neighbors. We're acquainted with them. So we will wait a little while and see what effect your preaching has upon them. And if we find that it does them good, and it makes them more honest and less disposed to cheat Indians, then we will again consider what you say."
Wow.
Now, there's a lot that we could say, and he had a lot more to say. That was just two little lines of the entire page about that long. But he brings up some interesting points, some good points. What if that was the case? What if people wouldn't make a decision on following God or accepting that relationship with God or with Christ? What if they looked at your life to see what that's like first? What would they see? Would they see something that's worth getting into? Do they see something? Do they see a relationship that has made you stronger? That has made you a better person overall? Is that what they see, or do they see the opposite? If we ask ourselves that question, I think we might be disturbed by some of our answers, but how many people would accept Christ just by watching our actions or listening to our speech? You as an individual, think for yourself. The Apostle Peter makes it very clear that we've got to be careful when we're out and about, or even in our own privacy. We should be mindful of what we say and what we do, and especially how we think, because a lot of how we think is how we end up acting or saying. Right? And so the Apostle Peter says in his first letter that people like, well, he doesn't say this, but people like Chief Red Jacket are watching. And others like him, they're watching us. They're watching us and they're listening to us. And they're seeing what difference there is in our lives because of our faith. That's what they're looking for. And he says, be mindful of this. He says in 1 Peter 2:12, to conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, so that in a case when they speak against you as those who do evil, they will glorify God in the day of visitation. So in other words, Peter is explaining that, they're going to see you, in a lot of times they're going to see you as a threat. They're going to see you as someone negative. But conduct yourselves morally correct, right. Conduct yourselves honorably, it says. Well, that word integrity goes with that scripture right there. Because the word we see that he uses for observe, well, that means or the word see, is actually, that word comes from the Greek word that means to observe. It's not just about a passing glance. Oh, there's you over there. No, this is about observation of your life. And I think this is a great lesson for Father's Day, because guess what? Fathers and mothers, guess who's watching you the most? Your kids. Or grandparents. Your grandkids. That's who they're watching. So we're to conduct ourselves honorably. We're to be good examples to others. People are making mental notes on us, whether we like it or not. Especially if we claim to believe in God. I was watching a video the other day, and it said there was a group of men and women gathered around a table, and they're talking about the topic is about God, and one of the ladies speaks up and she says, "Well, I'm a Christian." And he said, "Oh, you're a Christian?" He said, "Oh, okay, so what do you think about the Bible?" And she said, "I don't believe it." And everybody just kind of stopped, and he's like, "Oh, wait, what?" He said, "You're a Christian, but you don't believe in the Bible." So we have to conduct ourselves honorably because people are watching. And what do they watch for? Well, like Chief Red Jacket and others like him, they watch to see if our behavior matches our belief. Do you walk, do you walk your talk? And does your character match your confession? Are you the same person today that you will be Friday? That's what Chief Red Jacket's talking about. The hallmark to the Christian life, I think we could argue, one of those hallmarks is absolutely integrity. Because that's what people want to see in us as believers. Are we good? Are we honest? Are we not giving in to cheating or other negative aspects or negative sinful behaviors? Integrity is that high, kind of going into the meaning of integrity. There's couple different ways you can look at integrity, but integrity is a high standard of living based on a personal code of morality. But there's more to that. Not only that, but it doesn't succumb to the whim of the moment or dictates to the majority. Because guess what? Having a high level of integrity, that means sometimes you're not going to go with the majority. You're not going to go with the crowd because they may not be making the right decision or the morally acceptable one in that moment. So having high integrity is not simply the high popular option. Sometimes it's the opposite of that. But integrity to a personal character is like what health is to our body or what 20/20 vision is to our eyes. A person with integrity, it seems like they're able to kind of put things together a little easier. They really don't have anything to hide, much anyway. Proverbs 10 verse 9, Solomon says, the one who lives with integrity lives securely. A person of high integrity, their lives are an open book. It's almost like they say to a watching world, go ahead and look. It's okay. You're not going to find anything that's going to trouble me or go against my character. My walk is going to match my talk, and my character will match my confession, and my belief or my behavior is going to match what I believe. And of course, we could look at, when you want to talk about examples of integrity, you really could get a full list of names, but the best example that I could ever think of when it comes to having a high moral code would be Jesus, right? That's the go-to answer, right? Jesus Christ. Without a doubt, Jesus is the supreme model of integrity. His life was evidenced by his purity and his excellent character, to the point that his enemies, when they tried to trip him up and they would try to find some fault for him to get him imprisoned or killed to that extreme eventually. But the whole time they couldn't figure out how to get him. He was too good to be got. I guess you'd say it'd be a terrible line of grammar, I think, there. But it says in Mark 12:14, when they came to him, they said, Teacher, we know that you're truthful and defer to no one, for you don't show partiality, but teach truthfully the way of God. Well, that's a big statement to make towards someone. The NIV version actually says, Teacher, we know you're a man of integrity. In other words, you have a high moral code, Jesus. You have a high standard of living when it comes to your moral beliefs. Do we have a high code of integrity that we live by? Or is it something we need to work on? He was the type of person that, while on earth, that even when he was there at the end of towards the end of that physical earthly life, Pilate stood right there in front of everyone in Luke 23:4, and he said, I can't find any charge for this man. He's innocent. I don't know what to tell you. The only reason Pilate acted the way he did is because he was pressured to act. And he acted out of fear. He acted out of fear. As a governor, it wasn't a good idea to report back to the emperor that your region was a little out of control because of this Jesus guy. But even Pilate himself couldn't find any evidence of fault, no basis of guilt. In other words, Jesus' behavior matched what he believed. Jesus was the same person this day as he was this day. And it's for these reasons that Peter instructs us in 1 Peter 2:21, for you were called to this because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. Peter gives us an example, a perfect model of integrity that we can follow. Because if the world is watching us, guess who they're to be watching? It's Jesus. They're to be seeing Jesus in what we do, in how we talk, in how we think. And to do that, we follow his example. There was a preacher in Topeka, Kansas that urged his congregation. Basically, he urged them that text there in 1 Peter 2:21, and he challenged his members to, the members there at church to basically do like a what would Jesus do type challenge. And before making any major decision, ask that simple question first, and then make your decision based on what the right answer is. Now, we deal with this a lot. We actually can throw this question in our lives I would say every hour, but I'm sure for some it's more than that. But you know, what do you do in that moment when someone cuts you off in traffic, makes you upset? What do you do? Or if you accidentally cut someone off and they're very upset at you, how do you respond? Do you respond the way they're acting? Do you respond differently? What if I told you some really interesting gossip? What do you do with it? You take it to somebody else because it's too good to be held to yourself, right? I mean, you know how hard it is to keep a secret sometimes when it comes to the gossiping world. It is like natural behavior for us to want to pass it on like a torch to the next person. But we're not to do that. It's not how we're to live. And even though that's a simple thought, a simple challenge, what would Jesus do? It's profound. And I think that if we really did that, I would say it would challenge us quite a lot in a lot of different ways. I think it would realistically capture not only the excitement and the joy of doing that challenge, but I think you would really be able to see that sacrifice that you really put into your individual life when you follow Jesus. Because there are a lot of things that we give up in our fellowship with Christ and in our walk with Him. And so that same challenge is presented today, I believe. You know, are we going to walk in Jesus' steps? Are we going to follow His model? Are we going to make a pledge that before we make major decisions, especially life-altering decisions, are we going to stop and say, what would Jesus do in this moment? How can we live our lives full of a higher integrity? But how is integrity practiced on a daily basis? Because here we are, we've been talking about what integrity is, how important it is. That's great. All that is wonderful. But where are we put to the test when it comes to our integrity? Number one is in tempting circumstances. In temptation circumstances, your integrity is put to the fire, put to the test. And you have to make a decision based on that. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11, you know, we've got a lot of writings from Peter when it comes to integrity. And right here he says, "Dear friends, I urge you as aliens and temporary residents, to abstain from fleshly desires that war against you." Well, if you abstain from something, you get away from it. You have nothing to do with it. You instead of running to it, you actually are running away from it. And that is how we are to treat temptation. In tempting situations, we are to get away from it. That means maybe avoiding situations where we can easily be put in those moments of temptation, whatever your weaknesses may be. You know what they are. Satan knows what they are, and he likes to use them against you. So how do you combat those things? And I think there are different ways that we can. I think simply practicing a stronger self-control has a lot to do with it. Has a lot to do with the strength we have to be able to say, or to have that ability to say no to a temptation and to get away. In authoritative situations, you know, it's in 1 Peter 2, 13 through 14 and 17, he said, "Submit to every human institution because of the Lord, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to governors sent out by him to punish those who do evil and praise those who do good." And then it skips to verse 17, "Honor everyone." Well, you know, Peter instructs us to respect the government and the ones who hold the forces of the government. We're to submit or to yield to those things. And what does that mean, to yield? Well, yielding or submission is a key proponent in the life of a Christian. And I say that for a reason, because we submit ourselves, yield ourselves to God, right? We actually yield ourselves when it comes to the helping others or to the care of others. That's how we are to be. Yielding means that we don't have to have our way all the time. You ever come to a yield sign You know, the yield sign is the most confusing road sign I think people around the United States have a problem with. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten behind people and they've stopped at a yield, or they just blew right through it. A yield means you slow down and you make sure no one else is coming. And if they are, guess what? You let them go first. You don't have to have your way in a yielding situation. You got to wait. You got to hold back a turn. Well, what does that work on? Our self-control. So yielding or submitting is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It's a sign of self-control. And that's something we can work on. It's kind of like the guy that told the preacher, he said, preacher, I got, every part of me got saved except my right foot. And he said, what do you mean your right foot didn't get saved? He said, well, that's my left foot and I hadn't got it submitted yet. Well, we submit ourselves wholly and all that. But integrity says that we may not like the law, but we will obey it. We may not like the person in office, but we'll honor the position. We may not like the direction our nation's going or other nations are going, but we're going to pray for God's intervention in that or how we can help with that. Integrity says that we will obey God first above all else. And that means even if we suffer the penalty for doing the right thing. In the work environment. Now, when I use this example, I'm not using this to associate the workplace with slavery. So don't go there with me. But in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 18, I think this is a good example, though, because slavery was prevalent in the Roman Empire. Like some 60 million people were known to be slaves. I mean, a lot of people. And he said in chapter 2, verse 18, household slaves, submit yourselves to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the cruel. Slavery in the Roman Empire, if you were a slave, you were not considered a person. You were considered an object of basically property, or an object of property. And while we don't have this form of slavery in our country today, that's why I don't want to connect the two exactly and say that the workplace is the same, because it's totally not. But anywhere you work, if you work somewhere, you know that you are amongst a lot of people, especially if you work somewhere like a factory or a restaurant or a store. Unless you're working at home by yourself, even if you're dealing with customers, you are showing certain attributes about yourself that some other people don't ever get to see. You spend a lot of time with your work family. You probably spend more time with your work family than anyone else, some might argue. And so it's important that we put on that high level of integrity, or we practice that high level of integrity, even in the workplace. How do we deal with our supervisors? How do we deal with our coworkers? How do we deal with our clients or our customers or our employees? Do we do it with a high level of integrity, or do we not? As believers in Christ, our integrity goes to work with us every day. It manifests itself in the way that we act, in the way we work, in the way we treat others, in the way we talk to people. It manifests itself. And it really paints a very good picture of the kind of person you are to others. I think it manifests in the way that we respond sometimes to procedures or policies, or to difficult and sometimes unjust work assignments, or the workplace itself. It further manifests itself in our attitude and our convictions and honesty that we display while we're at work. Remember that people around you are watching, especially if they know that you are a believer in Christ. Integrity demands that we stand up for what's right and the upright thing to do at all times. Never giving in to the wrong thing. And finally, in our suffering, our integrity can be very well known. Some would actually argue that in suffering, that's the true test. That in suffering, your integrity is put to the fullest extent of testing it to be. 1 Peter 2:19, for it brings favor if because of conscience towards God, someone endures grief from suffering unjustly. The greatest test of integrity that you could argue here is how we respond to suffering. Because I think I think it's fair to say that nothing really shows our true character than when we deal with pain or problems. Because we can act all strong and mighty and brave and all these good, positive things on a good day. We can do that, right? What about a really bad day? When there's a lot of problems, where you're in pain, whether spiritually or physically. But suffering reveals what we're like. Suffering builds character. And with God, we can overcome that suffering. As long as we live on this planet, we will experience suffering. We're all going to have problems. We're going to have pain. The question is, how do we deal with it? Because people are watching you to see how you react to the misfortunes in your life or the sufferings of the world. Helen Keller said, although the world's full of suffering, it's full of those overcoming it. That's a positive way to look at it. Because even through her blindness, she was looking at the positive aspect of it. When you're suffering, seek God. During the bad times, seek God. And the good times. Don't just limit yourself to the bad moments. Be conscious of God and ask God when you're going through those troubles and those persecutions or tribulations. Ask God, instead of, why me? Try thinking, what are you trying to show me? What are you trying to teach me right now? What are you trying to tell me? Because here are the facts. Our integrity is, as we close this morning, our integrity is put to the test every day. In virtually every situation you can imagine. We are being watched closely on how we respond. And the choice of our walk matching our talk, our behavior matching our beliefs, and our character matching our confession, that's up to you. What will you do? This morning I want to encourage you to uphold a high level of integrity. Practice on that. Pray about it. If you feel like integrity is definitely not a strong suit, you have a lot of issues with it, seek God. Pray to God. Ask Him to help you with those things. As brothers and sisters in Christ, we're here for you. We can pray with you and for you. And if you're here this morning and you are and you're not a child of God, I want to encourage you to make that change. Change your life completely. Bring Christ into your life. He's waiting on you. He's waiting. So this morning, if you're here, you're not a child of God, we're here to encourage you to make that step and to help you get started on that way. But if you're here this morning and you are a child of God, you are a Christian here today, and you feel like you need prayers and encouragement, or you're going through a very bad time, we'll pray with you and for you and encourage you any way that we can, or help however we can. So, why not make it right as together we stand and as we sing?